Waking up, you hear a rooster call out in the morning. The sun hits your window and it is a new day. Walking out into the town square, you see a crier, and he is calling out to warn the citizens that the next town over was raided by hooded figures and dozens of villagers are now missing, presumed dead. You look to your friend and ask, "Is this something that we should be worried about?" And your friend says, "Oh no, he is a fool. He is just trying to scare us by stirring up fear. The most we have to worry about is the harvest, and it won't gather itself. Are you ready to head out?" You get to the fields and you begin your work. It is a pleasant morning and the day goes by without a hitch. Even the memory of that crier fades from your thoughts as the day draws to a close. The sun sets and you gather your tools and head to the small shed where you retrieved them in the morning. As you step out from that tiny shack, you call out to your friend and you hear nothing. Scanning the landscape, you suddenly see that your friend is out in the field with what looks to be an arrow in his back, but before you know it, you feel an intense pain in the lower part of your back, and your vision becomes blurry. You wake to a dark and stuffy room with chains around your neck and feet. You have no idea how you got here, but as you start to look around, you see your friend on the ground next to you in chains as well. How are you going to live through this? Welcome to Out of the Abyss. Hello everybody, I am Bo and this is Critical Masterpiece. Today we will be talking about the adventure Out of the Abyss. The campaign will advance the party from level 1 to level 15. The setting of this module is in an area called the Underdark, a series of caverns, tunnels, and cities filled with creatures as diverse as that of the surface dwellers. Even though this is a 5e campaign, this setting is more of an eldritch horror. If you don't know what that is, think of a Call of Cthulhu game, and with that, the ability to find the characters possibly going insane during this campaign. It is up to the dungeon master and the players whether they embrace this concept or have it be more of a background thought. Though, I would encourage all parties to use this mechanic as much as possible, though that may not always need to be the case. After all, this is your game and you know your players best. My first thought when reading this module was, great, another prisoner trope. I gave it a chance, and after I finished reading the module, I was thinking, how am I going to kill the players with insanity? A smile washed over my face, and I was hooked. Who wouldn't want to unleash the Demigorgon upon the party? There is so much here in this book, but I will try to stick with the first chapter. So yes, if you are a player and your DM is running this soon, leave now, there are spoilers ahead. To some, this module could be considered a bit bland. Reasons being, the party is in the dark most of the time walking through caves. The misconception is that there is not a lot when it comes to the change of scenery. This is a legitimate concern. I say this because that was my first thought as well. It will be up to you as the dungeon master to stay excited about this adventure and show your players that the Underdark is mysterious, beautiful, and has lots of character. Just remember that there might be times where it could get a bit repetitive. So, it is in my opinion that you may want to acquire a few books that can help liven up your setting. These reference materials can help by expanding your vocabulary and in turn make the environment feel a bit more diverse. A resource that I use regularly is a book based in the Pathfinder setting called Caves and Caverns, which I will have a link below. This helps spur my imagination so I can make my locations feel a bit more alive. Now that you have the resources at hand, this is where you slowly bring in the descriptors into play. As the module continues, slowly bring in more and more descriptions of this landscape as they begin to get used to the environment. Think of it this way. Try to equate the splendor and intrigue of the Underdark in a similar fashion to the first time Jake Sully sees Pandora. Just as his eyes adjust, the players will too. There are hundreds of ways to describe Topside. You have mountains and forests, grasslands. It is the same with the Underdark. This part of the world is alien, and the surroundings should be described in that way. You as a dungeon master need to periodically, and when applicable, reinforce to the players that they may be deep inside the earth, but the flora and fauna here at times rivals anything that they have seen topside. On the other end of the spectrum, you will need to describe how musty and bland the air can be, the lack of wind, or even constant change in environments such as rain, snow, or snowstorms can make for locations to be very musty or very stuffy. This in turn can help players feel a bit more engaged in this story as they travel through the dangerous landscape, though try not to overdo it. Sometimes less is more. This brings us to getting player buy-in. At the start of the campaign, prior to the first session, have a one-on-one talk with each of the players. Have them create an NPC that they were with before the start of the campaign. Discuss who this friend is and how they were captured together. The GM then creates a table of results that defines the end to the NPC. Have the player roll on this table to confirm the fate of the NPC. Yes, it is a bit tragic, but it will give your player a reason to continue. It is up to you as the DM to create as many or as few NPC demise scenarios as you see fit. Examples could be falling to their death or even eaten by creatures in the tunnels. No matter the outcome, make sure the player sees the result at some point along their journey. Though, this may not need to be mentioned, but do not tell the player if their friend dies off screen. Let the player find the result while traveling. Another result could be a bit more immediate. The friend escapes, but they get caught shortly thereafter. Have the NPC in chains outside the cages for all to witness. Have Ilver say, "Smile, for it is I who deliver you to your maker." And then she runs them through. Explain that she has no expression as she withdraws her blade from the body. This would motivate the player who knows the NPC. I know it is a bit more work, but it will pay in spades as the story unfolds. Now that we have the setup done, we can now discuss where the campaign is set. The players find themselves captured and are now held up in a remote outpost deep within the Underdark. There can be some issues that surface dwellers may have during this campaign. The first is the difficulty seen in the darkness, or even with the aid of minimal light such as bioluminescent mushrooms. Describing how they will have to adapt to the new environment can be a great way to have new and engaging roleplay scenarios. Describe how the shadows play tricks on the player's vision, and use these moments when they encounter creatures that use the darkness to their advantage. The next problem is only after they leave the outpost. Getting lost or wandering aimlessly through the Underdark is a definite possibility. As a DM, don't get too carried away with this thought. The two main things to keep in mind during this campaign is the player's enjoyment and rolling some dice. So, make this adventure scary but not too difficult where the players check out after the first session. Third is the lack of food and water. Even with the foraging aspect, I see this skill best suited for the surface and for the environment that the players have been accustomed to. If the players have this skill, remind them that this environment is absolutely foreign to them. Yes, this skill will aid them, but there is no guarantee that they will be successful at the start. Going back to what I said earlier, this is an alien environment, and trying to find something edible in the Underdark will be extremely difficult. A good way to understand this is look up edible mushrooms. Then look up ones that are deadly but look exactly like the edible ones. Imagine now you are in the Underdark and you can only see in shades of gray. This makes it very hard to discern the difference between a deadly mushroom and one that you can eat. This is up to you as the DM to gauge how difficult you want this to be. Understanding your players will help make this process easier. And if your players aren't having fun, ease up on the restrictions. When they are having fun, in turn, you will have fun. Remember, there are bigger problems in the Underdark, more important than trying to find clean drinking water and safe food to eat. It doesn't have to be the foraging that is the demise of the party. Now, fourth, the passage of time. Being that this is the Underdark, time in your world may pass a bit differently than topside. Though, to make it easier, keep the time consistent with topside, since in this area is in essence directly tied to the surface. We do not need to get bogged down with the exact mechanics of this. And what you will need to reference on occasion is the lack of the ability to account for time. We on the surface take for granted the movement of the sun across the sky, which gives us the ability to account for the passage of time. So going to sleep in absolute darkness and waking up in absolute darkness can be a little unsettling. Even in the real world, this is a major problem. Just ask anyone who lives as far north as Alaska. Fifth, now that we have gone over trying to see in the Underdark, the potentials of getting lost in this labyrinth of tunnels and corridors, and finding food and water, we can begin to talk about how the passage of time can help facilitate the unraveling of a character's mental state. The state of sanity is at the heart of this module. The authors do not address this concept until Chapter 2, and I think that it is extremely important to quickly discuss this condition, since it is the unraveling is the theme of this campaign. In big bold letters on page 21 of this module, the creators address this theme, the slow decay of the characters' minds as they travel further into the Underdark. I encourage you as a DM to look at Chapter 8 in the Dungeon Master's Guide to get a bit more of an understanding on what sanity can do to a character. This chapter will help you implement sanity into your story. An example from the mid-20th century, just after the Second World War, some of those that grew up in the era just after learned how to use and reuse items that we today discard without a second thought. And why do I use this as a reference? They were not part of the war, but they lived in the aftermath of the conflict. And during that time, they were conditioned to reuse everything as much as possible. To notice someone reusing a plastic Ziploc bag over a dozen times, when in this day and age we would just throw it away immediately, is an example that it doesn't take a sudden or traumatic event to alter a person's daily routine. Similar to this example, excluding the imprisonment aspect, just being stuck down in the darkness can slowly tear away at the mental stitching of a person's psyche. This book uses a lot of different situations to help facilitate the slow decay. It is up to you as a DM to implement how often you make the players roll for this condition. Though, I would urge you not to do this as often as one would need to in a Call of Cthulhu game. I'm just saying that it might be a short campaign. The sixth thing that you will want to remind the players is the ever-present danger of creatures that want to feast upon the warm bodies of the adventurers. Going back to my first reference in the movie Avatar, a safety briefing was given. The colonel says, "Every living thing that crawls, flies, or squats in the mud wants to kill you." Not only are the residents of the Underdark trying to hunt the players down, creatures hunting them from within the shadows, the paths and tunnels may end without warning. They could unknowingly walk right off the side of a cliff into the absolute darkness. Though anticlimactic, this is a real and ever-present danger in the module. Remind the players that this is a definite possibility. Everything that I have spoken about up to this point is the chance of the character dying. At the beginning of this module, preferably during session 1, you will need to go over some sobering facts about this adventure. One is the likelihood that one or more characters would perish at any point in this story. The best way to facilitate this loss is to ask the player to help describe the last moments of the character as they retire. This will be more meaningful for the player, as well as a good way to have the rest of the party accept the loss of a good friend and ally. There is so much more here to unpack, but that is definitely for another video. Now that we have gone over the heavier aspects of the module, let's discuss some things that you will need to keep in mind during the course of the campaign. The first is the use of roleplay. There will be a lot of traveling and downtime that the book doesn't truly go over. Once the players escape the prison encampment, they will have to travel for weeks on end in the Underdark. This can go a few different ways, but knowing that it is part of the campaign, you can make some notes to help lead your players into some good roleplay events. Though not every party will be inclined to do so, you will have to see how they all work as a team and use those moments to facilitate character development. Though this is if the players choose to do so. You as a dungeon master will have to carefully watch the players. The danger with a slow, methodical trudge through the Underdark is, at first your players will want to be engaged in the mechanic of travel, but once one session of travel extends into the third or fourth session, you as a DM will need to find a way to change up the types of interactions that the players encounter. Out of the Abyss starts off fairly well. In the mix from the start, the campaign then slows down to a literal crawl or walk once out of the imprisoned encampment. There are some locations that can take a month to get to. There are dozens of videos and articles making travel more interesting, but I don't have to tell you that every group is different. More so, the mood of the individual from session to session can change. You will have to constantly adjust the flow of each session to fit the table's current level of engagement. If a slow and steady march is not something the table wants to partake in, you can change it up and roll to see how the travel went, or even just describe how the last few weeks progressed. This will get your party to the next story beat, but it will speed up the adventure much faster. And because of this, you will have to prepare a lot more for each session. Piggybacking off of the last idea, encounter building for this adventure can be quite unique and a bit challenging at times. And yes, there are a plethora of beasts and unsavory creatures that will want to feast upon the adventuring party, but each encounter doesn't have to be an all-out brawl. At times, you should deploy the abandoned outpost or the ruined structure. Just like on the surface, there can be all sorts of old and interesting finds that rarely get the attention that they deserve. Allow your players to explore these abandoned structures and to discover clues to civilizations long forgotten and now swallowed up by the darkness. Not only can you change things up in relation to types of encounters, you can deploy traps or puzzles along the route. Whether it is a puzzle that forces them to find a way across a chasm or a trap with a time limit, you as a dungeon master can sprinkle these items into the story, making for a fantastic roleplay. This can be another way to break up the monotony of just another day traveling in the darkness. Getting back to checking in with the party. This campaign runs the risk in a similar fashion to a Curse of Strahd or a Call of Cthulhu setting. The Underdark is a bleak and dreary place that can take the toll on the player's attitude. In other words, campaign fatigue in this setting is a real threat. Even if this wasn't a setting in the Underdark, I would ask you to check in on your players on occasion. This is similar to player buy-in. If you show the players that you care, they are more likely to stay engaged in the story even when things aren't going as planned. Circling back to the beginning of the story, your players are prisoners at an outpost in the middle of nowhere. Along with your party members, there are 10 other named NPCs that can help the party. You can have one of the players run one or more of the NPCs. This can be helpful by unloading some of the roleplay off of your shoulders, and you can delegate it onto one of the players. You will need to remind the player that this NPC does not have the same goals as the party. When the time comes, you may need to take back the NPC and do what is in the best interest of that character. This can easily be handled by stating to the party that if and when the NPC is at a point of divergence, you, the dungeon master, will need to take control of the NPC to resolve the issue the NPC has. Going over each NPC is not necessary, for the player will be able to get a better feel for the character the longer that he or she is in control of said NPC. Now on to running the first chapter. Already stated, your players are prisoners to the Drow. They are awaiting transfer or to be put to death by being fed to the Quaggoths. This is where you as a DM can describe the lack of empathy that the guards have. The guards are not soulless, it is more that they see themselves far superior to those imprisoned. This is where the friend of each player created comes in. This friend can try and sneak off, and depending on the pre-designated outcome, the player may see their friend being killed in cold blood by the Drow, eaten by Quaggoths as punishment, or find the friend dead later on in the story. The lead up to the breakout or escape can be part of the roleplay that I previously discussed. No matter how the players choose to go about escaping, they will have a few different choices in front of them. Once the escape starts, this is where I would pause the session and ask a simple but small series of thought-provoking questions. Your options are as follows. Do you want to run and have the best chance of survival, or do you want to stick around and try to find your belongings? Remind them that, be warned, sticking around could get yourself killed. You will also need to emphasize that escaping without your equipment can be troublesome as well. Either way, if caught, the drow will not hesitate to kill you and feed you to the beasts. As a DM, you need to stick to your word at this point. If they do get recaptured here, you will have to follow through on what is said. Some can say that this is an adversarial DM playstyle. This idea is for another video. But remember, consequences to players' actions need to be followed up with honesty and integrity. Getting back to the adventure. Let's say that they are up for this challenge and they want to retrieve their possessions. They will have to slowly move from location to location by not trying to alert anyone or anything of their presence. The advantage that they will have is twofold. One, they are sneaking around during a fight that involves two deadly beasts slaughtering the entire outpost. And two, the prisoners are light-footed. They're wearing nothing more than simple cloth garments. These two parts of the larger equation will make it easier for the players to move about without the guards being the wiser. To make it a bit easier, let's say that the players want to explore the entire outpost. The 5 main places that they will want to be careful of are the 5 areas where the soldiers typically hang out. The northern and southern guard posts, the main guard tower, the main barracks, and the elite barracks. All 5 of these are fairly straightforward. They will need to be as stealthy as possible, though once they search these areas and gather what they need, they will now have weapons to resolve their issues other than just sneaking around. The next area to be mindful of is the Qualgoth Den. The players will know of this area, but investigating this room may be a bit more costly. Emphasize the extreme caution to the players when they arrive. Similar to the barracks and the Qualgoth Den, the main hall may need to be handled with care. Even with the fight going on, this room may still be occupied, or the drow may return to this area after the fight. Now onto the Shrine to Loth, Ilver's quarters, and Shrew's quarters. This place is where the players can find some fantastic information. The fight might still be going on during this investigation phase, and these 3 places might be empty, though to make it more interesting, they may not. The players can find their personal effects here. They also can find clues to their next destination. Next, we have the slave pens. Though this is where they will be at most of the time prior to the escape. This room is where the NPCs can hide out until the coast is clear. And at this point, they can all run for it out into the dark beyond. The waterfall and pool below can get your adventurers out of a sticky situation, but if they don't use the lift, there is no easy way to get back up. An easy solution would be to say that they find some spider webs that hang down from the nets, reminding the players that they may have to deal with the creatures who spun these webs might also be a problem. Yet again, this is the player's choice. This module can be fun. I would definitely see my players having a blast sleuthing through the Underdark. And in the end, they would have to fight the Demigorgon To me, that sounds like a lot of fun. With that, there are a lot of obstacles in this module that you will have to work through, but with a little bit of planning and the party ready to embrace an eldritch horror style setting, you could have a story that rivals even the best campaign. Next is a setting that is all about a heist. So, until next time, have fun adventuring.